In a vault beneath the Bank of Italy, there's a leather case bound shut by 11 wax seals. 5 belong to the ministry of the royal household. 6 belong to the bank itself. It has been opened exactly once since 1946, for 20 minutes, just to confirm that nothing inside had gone missing. What's inside belonged, for decades, to a woman most people have never heard of, a princess from one of Europe's poorest, smallest kingdoms, who became Queen of Italy and wore some of the grandest jewels on the continent without ever truly owning most of them. This is the story of Queen Elena of Italy, born a princess of tiny Montenegro. Thank you for watching, and for every like and comment. They matter more than you'd think. Subscribe and hit the notification bell, because some of what you're about to hear will genuinely surprise you. From Cetinje to the Quirinal. Cetinje wasn't much of a capital by European standards, a scatter of low stone buildings in a mountain valley, the seat of one of the poorest, smallest states on the continent. It's where Princess Jelena Petrović-Njegoš was born on the 8th of January, 1873, the fifth of 9 children of Prince Nicholas I and Princess Milena of Montenegro. She grew up Serbian Orthodox, tutored first by a Swiss governess named Louisa Newcomb, then sent at around 12 to the Smolny Institute for Noble Maidens in Saint Petersburg, where she stayed until she was about 18. She published poetry in a Russian magazine called Nedelia and moved comfortably through Russian court circles. Remember that detail. It matters later, because of a myth that refuses to die. Montenegro itself survived largely on Russian money. Tsar Nicholas II's government subsidized the kingdom and sent it arms, and when Elena's engagement to Crown Prince Victor Emmanuel of Italy was announced in 1896, British newspapers didn't bother being polite about it. One called her a pretty princess, poor though she be, and noted that her 2 million franc dowry existed only because the Tsar had stepped in to help his only friend. That's the real link between Elena and the Romanovs, a subsidized dowry, not a diamond parure. Hold on to that too. To marry the Catholic heir to the Italian throne, Elena had to convert from orthodoxy. She did it at Bari on the 21st of October, 1896, 3 days before her wedding, and her own mother was so upset by the conversion that she stayed home rather than attend. The wedding itself came in 2 parts, as royal weddings so often did, a civil ceremony at the Quirinal, followed by a religious one in Rome. For that second ceremony, Queen Margherita gave her new daughter-in-law a Venetian lace veil, reportedly once belonging to Caterina Cornaro, the Renaissance-era Queen of Cyprus. Not a jewel, technically, but woven into the same story of an old family folding a newcomer into its history. The jewels that arrived alongside it, though, were spectacular: a diamond tiara and matching ear pendants from her new father-in-law, King Umberto I, a pearl necklace with a diamond clasp from Victor Emmanuel himself, and a diamond and pearl ivory-leaf stomacher that would go on to have a far longer life than the marriage of the woman who first wore it. 4 years later, an anarchist named Gaetano Bresci shot King Umberto I dead at Monza, and the poor princess from Cetinje became Queen of Italy. Nobody in Montenegro could have seen that coming. She turned out to be an odd fit for the role, in the best possible sense. She never much cared for court life and preferred a quiet existence with her children. The public affection she earned had little to do with any of this jewelry. It came from organizing relief after the 1908 Messina earthquake, one of the deadliest in European history, and from working as a Red Cross nurse during the First World War, when the Quirinal Palace and the Villa Margherita were converted into hospital wards. The Vatican gave her its Golden Rose twice, in 1930 and again in 1937, an honor rarely handed to a convert. One 1911 newspaper profile called her tall and striking, with hair as dark as a midnight forest, the sort of line reporters reached for when a queen gave them almost nothing else to write about. The Musy Emerald Tiara. One of the first things the new bride did with her wedding jewels was have them rebuilt. The Turin jewellers Musy took emeralds and diamonds out of her mother-in-law Queen Margrethe's own collection and set them into something new for Jelena. A tiara built on a base of diamond scrolls, topped by 5 large emeralds ringed in more diamonds, the emeralds removable, swapped out for plain diamonds depending on the occasion. The stones had history behind them already. They came originally from a Savoy emerald parure made in 1841 by the Viennese jeweller del Zotto, commissioned for Archduchess Maria Adelaide of Austria by King Charles Albert of Sardinia. Green stones that had already survived one royal household before Musy ever touched them. By the time the firm finished remounting them in 1896, they'd become something new entirely, worn by Jelena in her official court portraits from the early 1900s, sometimes paired with Margrethe's own emerald necklace, the young queen photographed again and again in the same handful of jewels. Her sister-in-law, Princess Natalia of Montenegro, had a near-identical version made for herself, which tells you something about how the two families borrowed from each other's designs. And then, sometime after the First World War, it simply stops turning up in photographs. It may well have been among the jewels Jelena gave up in 1915. No one can prove that, only suggest it. Either way, one of Europe's more striking emerald tiaras just disappears from the record. The Savoy knot tiara. If there's one tiara people associate with Queen Elena, it's this one. Musy made it around 1883 for Queen Margrethe, diamonds and pearls worked into the heraldic Savoy knot, a motif with an old motto attached to it. It tightens, but it does not constrain. After 1915, when Jelena gave up her personal jewels, this became almost the only tiara she was ever photographed wearing. In 1925, it was at her daughter Mafalda's wedding to Prince Philip of Hesse. 4 years later, the whole royal family filed into the Vatican for the signing of the Lateran Treaty, and there it was again. By 1937, it turned up at the christening of the Prince of Naples. And 1939 turned into something of a marathon year for it. In March she wore it to the coronation of Pope Pius XII, and later that same year, when Italy hosted a state visit from Yugoslavia, she appeared in it at a gala held at the Florence Opera House. Then came the most photographed occasion of her later reign, a December 1939 visit to the Vatican, the tiara paired with a diamond necklace and 2 diamond bow brooches. The tiara Jelena is best remembered for wasn't hers to keep either. Like almost everything else on this list, it belonged to the Italian crown, and today it sits behind 11 wax seals in the Bank of Italy, unworn since 1946. The Savoy Crown Diamond Necklace. The necklace that so often appeared alongside the Savoy knot tiara has a murkier origin than the tiara itself. Nobody's entirely sure when it was made, most likely sometime in the 1870s or 80s, paid for out of the Italian state treasury rather than commissioned as a gift, which is exactly why it counts as crown property rather than Jelena's own. What is clear is how often she wore it, and in how many configurations. Early in her reign, it appeared alongside the Musy emerald tiara. Later, once the emerald tiara had vanished, she paired it with the Savoy knot tiara instead, a necklace that outlasted the tiara it was originally photographed beside. In 1930, for the wedding of her son Crown Prince Umberto to Princess Marie-José of Belgium, the necklace reappeared reset into a new, larger configuration, presumably remounted for the occasion by whichever court jeweller had the job that year. A single strand of collet-set diamonds, reworked across 3 decades of weddings, portraits, and Vatican visits. It's still down in that Bank of Italy case today, next to the tiara it was so often photographed beside. Margrethe's pink diamond stomacher. Queen Margrethe ordered this one in 1868, and its paper trail is messier than most pieces in the sealed case. An elaborate diamond bow set with 768 stones, the largest of them a pink diamond rare enough to anchor the whole piece. It passed to Jelena along with the rest of the crown jewels after 1900, part of an inventory Margrethe formally handed over. There's something almost bureaucratic in that arrangement, easy to miss under all the diamonds. Jelena wasn't given free use of her mother-in-law's, or rather, the state's, jewellery. Margrethe handed it over with a formal inventory attached, and from that point on, Jelena had to request permission to wear each piece, one at a time, as though borrowing from a museum rather than inheriting a wardrobe. It's a strange arrangement for a reigning queen, and it tells you something about how seriously Italy treated the difference between what a monarch owned and what a monarch merely wore. A pink diamond bow brooch, still catalogued simply as part of the sealed group, sitting today alongside the Savoy knot tiara in a vault nobody's fully inventoried since 1976. The Romanov myth. Search for Queen Elena of Italy's jewels online, and you'll run into a claim that keeps resurfacing, that Tsar Nicholas II gave her a magnificent diamond parure. It's repeated often enough that it's worth stopping to correct properly. It isn't true, or rather, it's true of somebody else entirely. Grand Duchess Elena Vladimirovna of Russia, who became Princess Nicholas of Greece, inherited a genuinely spectacular jewelry collection from Grand Duchess Maria Pavlovna, including the Vladimir tiara that would eventually pass to the British royal family and end up on Queen Elizabeth II. Two women named Jelena, two royal families, one set of search results that can't tell them apart. The Russian one's jewels end up attributed to the Italian one often enough that it's become one of the most repeated errors in this particular corner of royal history. The real connection is smaller, but it's real. Jelena was educated in Saint Petersburg, moved in Russian court circles as a young woman, and her dowry only existed because Tsar Nicholas II's government subsidized it, treating Montenegro as an ally worth propping up. What's real is duller than a diamond parure, subsidy money Montenegro badly needed and Russia was glad to provide, nothing that ever passed through a jeweller's hands. The Albanian myth. There's a second myth almost as persistent, and it involves Albania. In 1939, after Italy invaded and installed Victor Emmanuel III as king, Jelena picked up the courtesy title Queen of the Albanians. She held it until 1943, when her husband renounced it along with his Ethiopian one. That's a title, though, nothing more. There's no Albanian parure belonging to Jelena, and none of the Albanian royal jewels you'll find written about online are hers. Those belong to Queen Geraldine of Albania, the Hungarian-born countess who married King Zog in 1938 and received a set of Cartier and Bulgari pieces, along with a diamond wedding tiara decorated with white roses and a heraldic goat motif, made by Austrian jewelers rather than the Italian houses Jelena favored. Two queens, two wardrobes of jewels, and only one of them ever set foot in Tirana as anything more than a distant, borrowed title. Jelena's connection to Albania begins and ends with a courtesy title she carried for 4 years and then quietly gave up. The sacrifice. If you want to understand where Jelena's own jewels actually went, you don't need a myth. You need 1915. That was the year Italy entered the First World War, and Jelena handed over her personal jewelry to help fund the war effort. It's very likely the reason the Musy emerald tiara disappears from photographs around this time, and the reason that, from 1915 onward, she's almost never photographed in anything but the crown jewels she held in trust rather than owned outright. She did something similar 20 years later. On the 18th of December, 1935, with Italy facing League of Nations sanctions over the invasion of Ethiopia, the government launched a campaign called Oro alla Patria, Gold for the Fatherland, asking ordinary Italians to donate their gold wedding rings in exchange for steel replacements stamped with the date. It was theatre as much as fundraising, staged in public squares across the country, and someone had to go first in front of the cameras. Queen Elena did it at the altar of the fatherland in Rome, removing her own wedding ring before a watching crowd, before a single ordinary citizen was asked to hand over theirs. By 1935, she'd been photographed in someone else's diamonds for 2 decades running. The ring she pulled off her own finger that day was the first thing in any of those photographs that had ever actually belonged to her. The ivy stomacher's second life. That ivy-leaf stomacher from Elena's wedding day, the one Victor Emmanuel's family gave her in 1896, had one more act left, decades after anyone would have expected it. Elena's other children had already received their own Petrović tiaras years earlier, made from entirely different heirloom diamonds. A diamond tiara for Princess Jelena in the 1920s, an ears of wheat design for Mafalda, a pearl tiara for Giovanna, and a convertible tiara for Princess Maria Francesca's 1939 wedding that broke down into 7 separate brooches. The ivy stomacher itself sat untouched for decades longer. Only in the 1950s, more than half a century after that wedding day, did King Umberto II finally send it to Petrović to be remade. Princess Maria Pia received the result, the pearl and diamond ivy wreath tiara, and wore it at her pre-wedding gala in Estoril in 1955. A single stomacher from a 19th century wedding, waiting 2 generations for its second act. The sealed vault and the quiet auctions. So what actually happened to everything once the monarchy fell? On the 2nd of June, 1946, Italians voted to abolish the monarchy. 3 days later, King Umberto II ordered the crown jewels handed to Bank of Italy Governor Luigi Einaudi, to be held for whoever has the right to them. They went into a leather case sealed with 11 wax stamps, 5 from the royal household, 6 from the bank, and they've stayed there ever since. The case was opened once, in July 1976, with jewelers Gianni Bulgari and Tito Vespasiani present, purely to confirm nothing had gone missing. 14 principal pieces, by most counts, tiaras, necklaces, earrings, bracelets, rings and brooches, containing by one lawyer's own account 6,732 diamonds and more than 2,000 pearls between them. In 2021, the Savoy heirs formally requested mediation, their lawyer arguing the jewels were always private property, never confiscated and never donated. The Bank of Italy calls itself the mere guardian. Nobody has ever formally appraised what's inside, though one estimate puts its commercial value somewhere around 300 million euros. The dispute is still unresolved. Elena's own jewels, the ones that were genuinely hers, took a much quieter road. You'll often hear that her personal collection was auctioned off piece by piece after 1946. That isn't really what happened. She and Victor Emmanuel went into exile in Alexandria, Egypt, hosted by King Farouk. He died there in 1947, and Elena moved on to Montpellier, in France, where she died in 1952. Her jewels simply left the country with the family. Individual pieces have surfaced at auction only occasionally since, sold by descendants decades later. A diamond bow brooch at Christie's in Paris in December 2024, estimated at 15,000 to 20,000 euros. A diamond monogram at Vienna's Dorotheum in May 2018, which sold for just over 16,000. Nothing close to a mass sell-off. Just a handful of pieces, trickling out generation by generation, from a family that mostly kept what was left. The crown jewels are still locked in that vault, still disputed, still unopened since 1976. Her own pieces took the quieter route, into grandchildren's hands, surfacing at auction only when one of them needed cash more than family history. 2 sales that aren't hers. Two more auctions get pinned on Jelena constantly, and neither one belongs to her. In May 2021, Sotheby's Geneva sold a magnificent natural pearl and diamond tiara by Musy for 1.5 million Swiss francs, catalogued as property of the Italian royal family. It's an easy piece to assume was Jelena's, same jeweler, same family, same sweeping description, but the catalogue traces it instead to Maria Vittoria dal Pozzo, Duchess of Aosta, who was briefly Queen of Spain decades before Jelena ever arrived in Rome. A separate 2007 Christie's London sale, sometimes lumped in with Jelena's story online, was actually Queen Marie José's collection, the wife of Jelena's son Umberto II, and the last Queen of Italy, not the one before her. And one more thing worth saying plainly. You'll occasionally see Jelena credited with a diamond pendant holding a cushion-shaped stone of nearly 22 carats, sourced back to a single Pinterest caption. No auction house catalogue, no reputable archive, backs that claim up. Until somebody finds where it actually comes from, it stays exactly what it is, unverified, and left out of the story we're telling here. Queen Jelena spent more than 4 decades wearing some of the grandest jewels in Europe, and she owned surprisingly little of it. What she did own, she gave away twice, once to a war, once to a public collection of wedding rings on the steps of a monument in Rome. The rest is still sitting in a bank vault, disputed, unseen, sealed behind 11 wax stamps nobody has broken since 1976. The Romanov diamonds were never hers, the Albanian parure never existed, and the single dramatic sell-off people love to describe is really a handful of brooches, sold quietly, decades apart, by grandchildren who needed the money more than the history. Maybe that's the right legacy for a princess from a kingdom most of Europe never bothered to learn about, a paper trail duller than the myths, and considerably more accurate.